absolutely deserve a world-class education, and they also deserve opportunities and access. In whatever classroom they're sitting, in whatever their community they're part. And it's personal for me because I grew up in a single parent home. I watched my mother work 2 and 3 jobs to ensure that I would have opportunities. And so it was public education, it was Title I schools, it was the classrooms, the corridors, the teachers, the leaders that actually spoke life and instilled hope in me and shared to me that I would do anything I could find my mind to. And so because of that experience, that led me then to want to become a educator. And so I spent these last 25 years serving scholars and leaders and teachers and school-based team members and communities. I started out as an elementary and secondary teacher. I went on to serve as an elementary and secondary principal. I've also served as a vice president of schools. I've served as a cluster leader or regional chief for the Education Service Center in the Metro Houston area of Texas. And I've served 2 times as a superintendent. In all of those experiences, my leadership style is that of student leadership and collaboration. And I am just so excited that I've been able to work alongside others to elevate student outcomes. This particular role here in Nevada is of interest to me because I love the work that you all have started around Portrait of a Learner, and it absolutely resonates with my why. I believe that we should be preparing scholars not just to graduate, but we want to prepare them to be future ready so that they can thrive. That is my interest. And again, I'm really excited to be here. I extend to each one of you a virtual handshake and just say again, thank you for the opportunity. Okay, so now to the presentation. Thank you for the performance task of being able to identify an area of improvement for this great state. And so our title on the presentation, Bridge the Gap, Nevada. This is a 3-year statewide opportunity initiative. Next slide. And so I'd like to start out with what I believe is a great commitment, and that is the promise that every Nevada student, regardless of zip code, background, or learning needs, that together we will create an educational system where opportunity is not just the goal, but it's actually the foundation. Advance. And so the contextual foundation of this presentation is I do want to just acknowledge that you all have done great work and have some excellent frameworks that are already in place. As I referenced the bottom portrait of the learner, I've read the statewide plan for the improvement of pupils. I know that there's been recent work done around reading, and so there's great opportunity here, and there are existing frameworks. My idea is that we bridge the gap by elevating those frameworks into one cohesive, opportunity-focused system statewide. And I say elevated because we want to ensure that with all of the great diversity throughout this great state, that every community actually has an opportunity to implement those wonderful frameworks that have been developed. Okay. So the purpose and the vision, again, a unified excellence system, and it is to unify the priorities of a coherent accountability system, of course, unify pre-K-12 literacy, unify the portrait of a Nevada learner in terms of its implementation throughout the state. And also, what's really critical to the work is unifying community partnership engagement. So really bringing along all of, we say stakeholders, but who are the stakeholders? Bringing along all of those important individuals so that we can unify priorities. And then strengthen the pathways. We know from data there's work to be done in terms of literacy. There's work to be done in terms of math. And so we want to strengthen those pathways. We want to do some additional work around math. And then also we want to ensure advanced coursework access for all of our communities, especially for those communities that are in rural locations. and then really do some expansive work around CTE, and then ultimately ensure success. So making sure scholars are future ready, making sure that we have the fragrance of personalized learning approaches throughout all of our campuses, that there is educator pipeline investment, and essentially that every student is empowered and equipped for success. I think. So here's the problem analysis and what I identified, and this is why I titled it Bridge the Gap. And it is because there's at least a 10 to 20% point achievement gap that persists statewide for diverse student populations. As you look at your data, you will see that in certain communities, students just are not being able to demonstrate proficiency. There are persistent achievement gaps. And so again, rural districts lack advanced course offerings and resources. And then some urban districts need intensive multilingual learner support systems. And so I believe the state's response should be to remove those roadblocks through targeted resources and supports, to provide tailored support to districts based on unique needs, and to create opportunity-based accountability systems that drive improvement. Next step. So here's a strategic framework based on 3 pillars. One is instructional infrastructure. Secondly, educator pipeline, and then third, data systems. So under the instructional infrastructure, it is just really talking about at the state level, how do we create the culturally responsive toolkits that can be implemented throughout any district, and the advanced learning access for scholars. It's also talking about how do we use our regional support teams to provide adequate technical assistance. Educator pipeline, we know that we need the right people in front of scholars, not just anyone, but we need the right people in front of scholars. And so we need to make a greater investment around strategies, institutes, helping districts with action plans so that they can attract and retain the right. And then the data system, I know that there was a dashboard, and so we want to bring a dashboard back so that we have access to real-time data, and we can look at predictive analytics to really see how well are we implementing our initiatives and how well are we providing resources to districts. Again, the instructional infrastructure components, and I won't read the small writing, but again, culturally responsive instructional toolkits. I remember serving as a principal, and I remember serving as a superintendent, and there were sometimes lots of initiatives and things that, are sent to the districts. And really, you want to know, what are you supposed to do with it? How do you implement it? And so that's where those toolkits actually come in. The advanced learning access portal, making sure all scholars have access to AP classes, dual credit, CTE, and then integrated portrait of a Nevada learner, really integrating that across content areas, making the language of the portrait of a Nevada learner be the basis of our conversations and our actions in schools and across the state. Advance. So educator pipeline investments, I really want to spend some time making sure that we're expanding our teacher residency networks, we're investing in teacher development, leadership excellence, that we're investing in leaders. We have leadership institutes for principals, aspiring superintendents, district leaders, that there's opportunity there. And then talent pathways, really unpacking the grow your own. There are so many scholars, even in high school, they already know that they want to be educators. So creating the systems and structures so that we're growing our own here at the state of Advance. For the data systems, again, I just spoke about bringing back a dashboard that helps with predictive analytics, also helps with gap tracking, and then regional support. So being able collaboratively as a team to have a dashboard that we can look at and see how well are we implementing everything that we've developed, how well are we supporting others, and essentially what is the actual ROI. What does this mean for scholars? Does the data show that what we've developed is actually advanced? So I broke it down into 3 years. Year one would be foundational building and pilot programs. And this is really to get an understanding of what already is in place here in the state of Nevada and to build out a plan for how we ramp it up and we ensure adequate implementation. Thanks. Year two is the rollout and system integration. So conducting the statewide rollout of those toolkits, expanding the AP access, the dual credit access, developing and implementing those leadership development institutes and teacher development institutes. And then for year three, advance. This is where we scale, sustain, and achieve. So making sure that we at this point attain 100% broadband access across the state of Nevada, especially for our rural communities, because we know that this is how we can eliminate digital opportunity gaps. And we want to ensure that advanced coursework is offered. I think it's important for us to publish an annual gap closure report where we demonstrate the measurable reduction in achievement gaps across key student subpopulations and really expand our grow your own pathways. Advance. And here's some success metrics. So 5% annual gap reduction, 100% rural course access, 10% retention increase of our teachers and our leaders, 85% portrait implementation. And this, of course, is looking at our multilingual learners, advanced coursework, our career pathways. Advance. And then opportunity focused supports for 10 populations, wanting to make sure everything that we've developed and that we plan, we're doing it with the students in mind. So making sure that we are planning things for students with disabilities. When we talk about portrait of a Nevada learner, we should be talking about all of our students, English language learners, and then making sure that we have some type of Nevada leadership alliance, really pouring into our leaders and helping them become instructional leaders so they then turn to their teachers and people want to come to Nevada. They want to come here, they want to stay. Advance. Here's a proposed budget overview that just has categorical allocations. And so you'll see here a large percentage in the teacher residency network or teacher pipeline, because we really need to attract the right people here. And then instructional toolkits and resources so that districts have what they need to ensure success. And then we have broadband expansion, leadership institutes, retention incentives, data systems, and evaluation. Advance. And so as I'm coming to a close, again, every student opportunity guarantee. And this is very high level, but Bridge the Gap Nevada will ensure opportunity is no longer dictated by geography, background, or circumstances across the state. Next slide. I will end again with what I started with, which is what I believe should be a commitment, and that is success measured by every child's achievement. So Bridge the Gap Nevada is the promise that every Nevada student will succeed regardless of zip code, background, or learning needs. I believe that together, collaboratively, we can create an educational system where opportunity is not just a goal, but it is actually the foundation. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Please remain seated, have a drink of water. We are going to complete our rating forms and then we'll be back with you in just a few moments. members for submitting your responses. Moving on, the board will now begin the 8 formal interview questions. Questions will be asked by different board members, and when you meet your 5-minute response limit, I will request you reach a summary for that. First question is mine. What do you believe is the most pressing issue in Nevada education today, and how would you address it?
Thank you, President Fowler, for this question. I believe that the most pressing issue today is the persistent achievement gaps across the great state through our various populations. And so I believe that this is something that needs to be urgently addressed so that we can make good on the commitment to our families and the communities in terms of ensuring that scholars have unlimited opportunities and they are future ready. And so I come up with 4 pillars and big action items that I want to implement collaboratively to ensure that we are addressing those achievement gaps. And the first is to align the statewide goals with instructional resources. And so when we're talking about helping scholars to be able to demonstrate proficiency, helping them to grow as learners, we have to ensure that the right high quality instructional materials are in front of them. And then we have to connect the dots for teachers and leaders, ensuring there is alignment of those particular resources to the goals and to state standards. So the first place is to align statewide goals and make sure that we have strong foundations in terms of curriculum. Also to make sure that those materials, the strategies, the systems, that they're accessible by all. So we don't want to only have great things that are able to be implemented right here in Las Vegas, but we need it to be implemented throughout the entire state. And the second thing is to strengthen the educator pipeline and leadership development. So when we talk about what needs to happen in classrooms for scholars, none of those things are possible if we don't have the right people, the right teachers in front of those scholars. And if we don't have the right leaders in the buildings, and if we don't have the right leaders at the district office. And so we need to strengthen that pipeline, and I propose that we want to expand our partnerships across universities and colleges. We want to expand our partnerships with some of the non-traditional teaching corporations that help individuals obtain their teaching certification. We also want to make sure that we have leadership development. So we want to make sure at NDE's level that we have a great offering of professional development that teachers and leaders can actually be a part of, that is useful to them, that actually helps them understand how to implement Portrait of a Learner, how to implement the high quality instructional materials, how to lead instructional. The third thing is target resources where we need them the most. So that is really looking at the financials and really making sure that we have formula that is fair, that ensures opportunity for all. And then finally, we want to expand whole child supports. And so when we talk about scholars, we're also talking about social emotional learning. We're talking about mental health supports. We want to make sure also we have those supports for teachers, not our leaders. And so when we talk about the Portrait of a Learner, we want to embed those whole child supports in those frameworks. And I want to make sure that we're connecting the dots in terms of partnerships throughout our community that can actually support these districts with the implementation of these core pieces. I think that those action items will help us jumpstart helping districts be able to close some of those achievement gaps.
Okay, I have a nice question. Member Hughes, thanks so much for being here. So how familiar are you with Nevada's Portrait of a Learner and relevant national frameworks? How would you ensure that Nevada's approach continues to evolve while remaining grounded in a whole child philosophy? Looking ahead, what is your vision for the Portrait of a Learner over the next 5 years? And how would you measure meaningful progress towards that vision?
Thank you, Vice President Hughes, for that question. I just want to start out by saying what my vision is looking ahead. And that is, I believe that the state of Nevada can certainly become the national model for the portrait of a learner. And I say that because as we look at other states, and my belief is that Nevada should not be like any other state, but when we look at other states, there are a few other states that have adopted the portrait of a learner. And they're still working through pieces of how that should look in their state. However, as I've evaluated the work that Nevada has done around the portrait of a learner and how you engage so many stakeholders in the process, I really believe there's an opportunity to continue that engagement and to really create what could be looked upon as a national model for implementation. Having said that, I'm excited that you all have adopted this framework because, as I said initially, I believe that we should be preparing students not just to graduate, but we want them to be future ready. And the portrait of a learner, it brings these competencies in that teachers should be working the curriculum and teaching students so that they possess those competencies, which will help them to thrive today and tomorrow. And I know that it is aligned to several national frameworks. I'm familiar with those. And I'm thinking about over the next 5 years how I would lead in terms of increasing the rollout throughout the state. I say one is that I want to ensure that we have listening sessions. And so I think that there needs to be some visibility and visits around the state to the districts to hear from superintendents about how they're feeling about the portrait of a learner, how do they feel about the implementation, where do they see that they will need support, so that then at the state level, we have the framework, but we need to outline the strategy, we need to outline the systems and the processes over the next couple of years, correlate it with our curriculum so that it is easily implemented throughout the state. We also need to have conversations about how teachers are able to get the certifications. Like, what does that mean as part of the portrait of a learner? And again, I think it's making the action plan relevant and actionable. Because the last thing we want is for this great initiative to just sit on the shelf somewhere or for it just to become, a buzzword. When you're talking to people and they're saying, we adopted portrait of a learner and that's it. And so I think over the next 5 years, it is really about crafting out that implementation guide. And that really starts with first listening and learning, understanding what is, and then having conversations throughout the districts to understand what support do you need. A rural district needs different support, from a district here in the city. And so having those conversations, bringing those same stakeholders together that you had when we talked about adapting it and planning it out, and then ensuring that we're working our way towards becoming that national model, which is absolutely possible.
Thank you for that. Member Hudson, for the record, what is your strategic vision for improving student outcomes in Nevada, particularly for our underserved students, student groups such as multilingual learners, students with disabilities, and students experiencing homelessness?
Thank you so much, Ms. Hudson. Now, my vision, of course, goes back to Bridge the Gap, Nevada, but it is to actually ensure that all scholars have an opportunity to achieve in an equitable way. So it is to ensure that over the next couple of years, that every scholar, regardless of whatever designation is associated with who they are, that they have the opportunity to actually succeed. And so for me, that means that there are 3 priorities that we need to focus on. The first, of course, is ensuring universal access to high quality instructional materials. We need to make sure at the state level that we prioritize ensuring that the right curriculum and resources are available to our districts. And I do just want to pause here and say, based on my experience having served as a principal, I don't believe that it is necessarily our responsibility or a good leadership practice that absolutely tells someone how they should do it. But I do believe that we should be a great partner and resource. And so for me, that means, of course, we need to have the conversations, we need to understand the needs, but we also need to plan with differentiation. And so that's understanding, as we're talking about the implementation, the high quality instructional materials, then what are the resources, the guides, the crosswalks, the assessment tools? How do we pull all of that together so that we're providing it as a resource to the districts and they have what they need to ensure those high leverage instructional strategies are evident in the classrooms and students are learning and teachers can teach. The second pillar is around prioritizing accelerated learning strategies. And so we are still, as a nation, recovering from COVID. You know, when we look at data with our middle schoolers now, they're the ones that, you know, were on the computer trying to do like the foundational grades. And so we still need a plan to accelerate learning. And so I believe at the state level, we want to provide the strategy, the systems, the toolkits to districts so they understand how to implement intervention and enrichment while also exposing students to grade level materials. And then thirdly, we want to align resources and we want to ramp up professional learning. It is the professional learning that is absolutely critical for teachers and leaders so they understand how to implement the frameworks. I always say that if the professional learning is not good or it's not relevant, it's not benefiting the teachers, it's not benefiting the students. And so we have an awesome responsibility to ensure that we create these professional learning opportunities that we roll out to the districts that really speak to our commitment in terms of bridging the gap.
Thank you for your answer. This is Member Land for the record. Your next question is, describe a time you led a large-scale effort that significantly improved student outcomes. What measurable results did you achieve? What strategies did you use? And what was your role? How did your efforts close achievement gaps across various student subgroups?
Thank you so much, Member Land. And it's really nice to have a student here today. This is exciting. It speaks to Nevada's belief in their scholars and their ability to be able to thrive in the future. Thank you for that question. And so I'll reflect again, as a former superintendent, I had an awesome opportunity to lead a district-wide literacy turnaround initiative. When I served in that particular district, I immediately noticed that in the state of Texas, we reference the students as emergent bilingual, but our emergent bilingual students and our students with disabilities were only demonstrating proficiency and literacy at 35%. And I thought, this is terrible. We're not even ensuring that at least half of our students are reading, you know, on grade level. And so for me, then my task was I wanted to implement a district-wide literacy initiative that, one, elevate the reading proficiency for the scholars. Two, it would also build their confidence. The third thing I wanted to do is make sure that in that particular plan, that there was opportunity to increase teacher pedagogy, leadership pedagogy, and culture. And so with that plan, that was developed. I led the development of it and I collaborated with my cabinet team members so that we could really talk about at least practical strategies that will be appreciated, understood, and implemented. And those strategies included adopting what we call high leverage instructional practices, and that's undergirded with getting better faster. It included real-time coaching. It included us reallocating some of our funds so that we could purchase the codables that could be used during reading. And I will say that one of our struggles, of course, was we didn't have any more ESSA funds. And so, you know, we were really trying to figure out, you know, where can we pull from here and there. But In addition to that, another strategy was making sure to ramp up professional development so that teachers understood how to teach reading. How do you teach scholars how to read? And so in doing that, within that particular plan, it helped to establish a clear vision and focus for reading instruction for the district. And it provided the framework, which included look fors, it included the strategies, it included the how. So it helped to give the resources of what needed to be done. For the leaders, it included real-time calibration walks with real-time coaching. And so I'm a very hands-on person. I actually enjoy walking with them and being able to go in the classroom and ask, what is the high leverage practice that you would actually coach this teacher on to increase the reading instruction here so that we get outcomes. I'm happy to say that with that implementation, within 1 year, we saw double-digit gains. And so we went from 35% proficiency to 55% proficiency. Also, because the district was very diverse and there was chronic, this was a chronic cycle of students not performing well. So the culture was very low and teacher retention was low. So another outcome was that we increased teacher retention by 10%. So we went from 60% to 70% the first year. The next year we went up to 90% retention. And ultimately we increased capacity. And what that said to me is that when you have a structured system, you have the resources, the strategies, the coaching, and you make sure that you provide that feedback, that you can ensure that classroom environments actually elevate student outcomes for all children, no matter where they study.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell, and thank you for being here. I am Member Braxton. This is part one of two parts. How would you implement statewide initiatives across 17 diverse districts? How would you balance both enforcing policy and accountability measures while also maintaining strong collaborative relationships with districts?
I thank you, Dr. Braxton, for that question. For this particular question, I just want to start out by sharing my belief around the importance of relationships. I believe that it is important to build, and it takes effort to build lasting relationships, and I believe that collaboration is essential. And so, as it relates to implementing statewide initiatives across 17 diverse districts, I would ground that in 3 essential pillars. And the first is clear and consistent communication systems. And so for me, that means implementing regular executive briefs. It means implementing this monthly superintendent call, which is like a Zoom meeting where we're sharing, those initiatives. We even get a chance to highlight, have other superintendents highlight some of their work. But it's about creating that two-way engagement of communication. I think the key piece is making sure from the state's perspective that every accessible website resource is up to date, people can access it and they can get the information that they need. That I am clearly communicating with them and that I am available to answer questions, that our regional teams are available to support. I will say also that visibility is very important. And so one of the things that I always do within the first 90 days is the listen and learn. And so for me, that is going out and visiting, it is connecting with the districts to understand what's going on and then to continue that cadence and actually in the communication, not just sharing the what, but sharing the why, and then collaborating to understand the how. That is really important. I would also leverage my experiences as a principal for many years as a superintendent. And I really do understand what it feels like to receive a mandate or an initiative without information. That's not fun. And so to make sure clear, consistent communication. The second thing is regional support and strategic customization. And that comes in because it's an initiative maybe that needs to be implemented across the state, but there has to be support to figure out how to implement it in the different areas. Because it's not a one size fits all. As we say, no school looks exactly like the other, no district looks exactly like the other. So even though we have this initiative, then I am saying that I want to spend some time to make sure that the regional support or technical assistance, that we are able to help the districts customize how that implementation looks. And the third thing, again, is just the two-way engagement and the feedback integration. So this is keeping the lines of communication open and making sure, some people would say it's communicating, but it's just making sure that there's an understanding, not just of the what, but of the why and the how. And that there are several resources. And then providing the space for individuals to articulate where they see challenges with it. And then collaborating together so we figure out how we customize the support to ensure their successful implementation.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. That's it, Ms. Member Dawson Owens, with the part 2 of that question. As state superintendent, how would you leverage state policy, funding, and partnerships to create the conditions that improve educator retention across Nevada's diverse districts?
Thank you so much, Member Dawson. And so again, I start out with my belief around transparent communication is absolutely essential. I also believe that visibility is key. So making sure that I am visible, making sure I'm involved, making sure that I understand, that I know, and that I'm cultivating authentic relationships. I think that that's critical to ensure that there are these partnerships built with every stakeholder. This includes our legislators, our business leaders, our civic leaders, our college connections. It also includes like our clergy, it includes our parents. And so my response to that, first, visibility, it is clear communication, it is being involved in knowing, understanding what's going on. And then from that, being able to clearly communicate with the different stakeholder groups so that we are seen as a trusted partner. I believe that it is important for me to do my homework and research so I'm knowledgeable about what's going on, knowledgeable about the perspectives of others, and that I show up physically in those spaces and at those meetings so that I can get an understanding of what is important to others. And from there, then I collaborate with all of you and other stakeholders so that, again, the messaging is clear and they see us as a trusted partner. I believe that that is also critical when we're talking about lobbying, financial support, when we're talking about lobbying for certain bills and things of that nature. I believe that I need to make sure that, again, I'm visible, clear communication, and that I'm establishing those trusted partnerships so that they see us as a trusted partner in the process.
Share an example of a time when you had to make difficult budget decisions to align with strategic priorities. In your response, please describe how you managed constraints, secured stakeholder buy-in, and how your experience prepared you to navigate Nevada's unique educational and funding structures and government model.
Okay. Sure. Thank you so much, Walker, for that question. I'll share. As a VP of schools, we faced a mid-year financial catastrophe, and that was based on a decline in enrollment and a decline in APA. And again, ESSER funds were exhausted, and then our state funds were diminished or decreased because our APA was lower. And so my response to that, again, I believe in collaboration And I want people to be part of the process. I don't just want them to sit at the table. I want them to actually engage in conversation. My response to that, first and foremost, was to clearly communicate what our situation was. And see, I'm a person, I don't like surprises. I like to get ahead and be able to craft the story. And so I think the same for those that I'm serving. And so I wanted our parents, the business community, the civic leaders, all of the important individuals that support the district, I wanted them to understand what was going on in our district. So I started out with a clear communication around this is what's happening, this is why, and this is what we're facing. And from there, I invited them to be part of a steering committee where we would be able to have several sessions and we could unpack the budget. We would be able to actually evaluate where we're actually spending our money. We were able to look at the decreases. What is the decrease in terms of dollars? How does this affect our 3 pillars? And so, of course, in our conversations, we always want to keep at the forefront of our mind elevating student outcomes. We want to put students first. We also want to keep in the forefront of our mind making sure that we maintain our commitment to educators, school-based team members, and leaders as far as their improvement and their leadership development, and then also the commitment to the community around making sure that our district was actually a place that people want to send their children. And so we had several steering committee meetings. Again, started out with, this is our issue. We grounded it in, this is our strategic plan that we started the year out with. These are our strategic priorities. This is where we're seeing our budget shortfall. And now let's kind of collaborate together to see where we can move funds around, where we can decrease in certain areas, and then let's brainstorm about where we can reach out for philanthropic support or write other types of grants. I feel like my process of first communicating what the situation was, and then of course inviting them to the table to have a conversation, that is what got the buy-in. I also invited teachers, I invited campus leaders, and I invited students so that they could also weigh in on some of the items and categorical items that we were looking at potentially shifting funding away from. I'm excited that we were able to work together to mitigate that financial decline in the middle of the year. We continue to work on attendance. If scholars don't come to school, then your state funds are limited. We continue to work on attendance, and we continue to keep our commitments around our pillars at the forefront. We did cut in some areas, but we didn't cut people. And we maintained our commitment to ensuring that all scholars have access to high quality materials. And I continued those steering committees to kind of provide updates and reports, and we could continue to talk about the process. And then we talked about what does this mean for next year? Because we're not getting any more ESSER funds. We're not getting this from the state funds, and we understand where we are right now. I think that experience, working through that with the district, I am certain it helped with our culture, because individuals were saying normally we just get an email that tells us what it is. We appreciate the fact that we were invited to be a part of the conversation. It will just connect with our greater community stakeholders. And so I feel like that experience, as well as other experiences I've had in leadership roles, helps me to understand the dynamics for the model. I do understand that funding is different right now. I understand that just all over ADA, is down. And so I believe that I would be able to help navigate those spaces by implementing some of the strategies that.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Member Ford?
All right, so I have a question from member Oral, and I'd like to ask you, how do you collaborate State Board of Education to ensure alignment on priorities and shared accountability? In your response, Please describe how she would engage students, legislators, state agencies, community, business partners, and how you would ensure student voice meaningfully informs state level decision making.
Thank you very much, Member Work, for that question. I'd like to say, of course, again, I view you all as the board as an essential partner. I believe that it is imperative that we have a unified message and that we're collaboratively working together. And so in order to ensure alignment on priorities and shared accountability, I want to start out by us working together to really outline and understand what is our framework, what is our plan, what is it that we want to achieve, what is our strategic priority. And so collaborating together to identify our strategic priorities and our strategic direction, we then can work together to develop those key performance indicators and those metrics. I feel like in doing that, we are developing a thought partnership, and then we've been building trust with each other so that we are collaboratively working together, transparently understanding the work that is laid before us that needs to be done. In addition, I want to fully understand what you all expect of me if selected for the role, because I want to be able to implement with excellence so that the districts that we serve throughout this great state, they really see us as partners, not just as, a regulatory body, but they see us as partners. They feel comfortable asking questions, and they really see and know that we believe in their ability to succeed and that we're committed to ensuring that process. And so again, I believe that starts with collaboration, collaboration, collaboration. It is building the relationship, it's transparent communication, and it is building that partnership around strategic vision and priority. And so I would welcome and look forward to that collaboration. And I think essentially we will be working hand in hand together so that this great state of Nevada, they not only see by reading, by watching, or hear the support, but they feel it, and they feel that unified vision of elevating opportunities for all scholars, no matter their zip code.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for all those wonderful responses to our 8 questions. Right now, I will open up to the board. Are there any clarifying questions that anyone would like to ask Dr. Mitchell? Seeing none. Well, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for your time today, and for all the interest that you have in serving as the next state superintendent of public instruction in Nevada. Do you have any closing comments you'd like to share with the board?
Well, again, I just need to say thank you to each one of you for this opportunity and for being selected to share. And I do again want to commend you on the work that you've already started here in Nevada. And I know that collaboratively working together, great things are in the future. And again, I extend to you a virtual handshake for meeting each one of you today. I am certain that based on my background experiences, but more importantly, my passion and my commitment, I am sure that I can contribute to the work that is being done here. So thank you very much for this time and for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. With that, you are dismissed. Thank you. And members, please tabulate your scores and we will collect those. Thank you.
Sure. Not yet. It's. That's me. Yeah. So. Well. There you go. See, they respect us. Yeah. There's. Right, so yes. No, not. Not your go.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. For those listening online or those in person, we are just taking a brief 20 to 30 minute break while we wait for our next candidate.
It falls in what time it's in, either earlier. Right. Caption is skateboard gone wild. From that, how you will. Yeah.
Bring out.
Right.
That is true. Chat for different reasons, but there's. Six. Much. Yeah. It's actually clear where. Seriously. So it's. Yeah. Like, yeah, great to get on. I said,
Yes, I was worried that it was a sit reset, so if you want.
First.
Mixing.
That's that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's just all like that.
Yeah.
Either.
So it's such a. Still, I think. Still, I think again. Yes, it's. Top priority. No. I bring down.
Now, when you're here, the bottom. So, when you can see the house, it's empty. Do you see it? So, I'm gonna add. Yeah, you. Right at. Right, it's hard. Work right down. But it's all going to give it talks together, because you need somebody to have. Nice. Nice to meet you. Hi. It's nice to meet you. Sorry to interrupt your photo op. You know, it's good to see you. Nice to meet you. Super. This is fun. Next. Stay in the schedule. I think this is the thing. So, all spaces. Yeah. Yeah, not quite the same communities. Three. And one. Yep. Thanks. You know what I mean? Person online and our members up here. So now we will move on to our final candidate. We have Dr. Enrique Sanchez with us today. And Dr. Sanchez, please begin by briefly introducing yourself and then proceed with your prepared presentation. You have 5 minutes for your introduction and 15 minutes for your presentation. When you'd like to advance the slide,
please indicate so and we'll advance the slide for you. At 14 minutes, I will indicate that you have 1 minute left to conclude your presentation. Please proceed when you are ready.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody, both here in person and anybody that's tuning in. I'm very happy to be here well today. My name is Dr. Heather Sanchez, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to interview for this critical role as your next state superintendent of public instruction. It's truly an honor to be here with you all today. Over the course of the last 20 plus years in my career, I've served in just about every educational capacity. You can see that I've been a classroom teacher, an instructional coach, parent coordinator. I've been a school principal. I've served as an executive director of schools and a chief of schools, overseeing a large portfolio of schools. And I currently serve as chief operations officer, overseeing the entirety of operations district. I've served in both urban and rural contexts across 3 different states and state systems. And can confidently say there's no aspect of the educational process I haven't touched at some point in my career. I'm a seasoned educator with a strong track record of shifting policy into practice in order to accelerate excellence, access, and innovation for every single student. But what you won't see from my resume is why I do the work that I do. And I think that's every bit as important as the looks. I'm a child of the desert and the mountains, born and raised in Mexico. My grandfather entered into the Llano Estacado, part of the state before statehood, in a covered wagon, a poor ranchman chasing opportunity. I myself am a product of the Hercules, attending Title I schools K-12, where resources may have been in, but educators change lives every day, including mine. My own background is complex, and at one point, my 3 siblings and myself lived in a shelter. I'm the first generation in my family with a college degree, a master's degree, or a doctorate. And if you had told 10-year-old me that I would be sitting in this room in front of you today, interviewing to serve as your next state superintendent of public instruction, I would have told you were completely out of your mind. And yet, here I am. I'm here because some educators see something in me I did not see in myself, and who refused to give up, even though I had given up on my seat. That's why I do this. That's why I do this. It's not for titles and accolades, it's for kids. Every child deserves it. Every child deserves the kind of care and opportunity that can change the entire trajectory of their life. Every child deserves access to the highest quality learning experience, regardless of their zip. That's why I'm here before you today. I believe that things work out the way that they should for a reason. And I believe that my professional journey has prepared me for this role in ways I could never have predicted. It would be my greatest honor for the families of the great state of Nevada to entrust me with the care of your most precious children. It's time for me to come back to the desert and the mountains, and it's time for us to get to work. Thank you for having me today. Okay. With that, I'm going to take a sip of water. We're ready to transition. Just like we're not going to set a timer. Okay. So, oral language and early literacy development are the key foundational academic skills that precede all others. The ability to read and to comprehend is the cornerstone of economic opportunity and freedom in this country. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to lay out a cohesive statewide approach that aligns policy, practice, and budget in order to ensure that every single Nevada student has access to the highest quality learning. The history of literacy outcomes past 10 years in the state of Nevada across multiple measures really tells us a story of a compelling call to action. There have been some rise feats and some opportunities. There was some that was very significant before the pandemic, and currently kindergarten readiness scores are on the rise, as well as districts that are showing some high grade. And at the same time, across multiple measures in time, we see persistent access and opportunity gap. Many students, particularly those that are furthest from educational justice. And so taken together, there's a compelling call to truly transform literacy outcomes in the state of Nevada. And there's been some significant investment in both infrastructure and funding in this state in the last 3 to 5 years. And to be quite frank with the board and anybody tuning in, work that's been happening in the state for the last 3 to 5 years, why it's been in this position. There's some transformative work happening. I believe the challenge we have before us is aligning pieces that will enable us to truly regard for next slide. I'm coming into this challenge eyes wide open, fully aware that before us is a paradigm shift that involves both technical and adaptive challenges, and both must be carefully attended to in order for change to truly happen. I'm entering into this relationship with the state deeply committed to collaborating with teachers, principals, superintendents, state officials, and the community to truly collaborate to shift the needle on literacy outcomes. We begin with the end in mind, and that's represented in the Nevada portrait of that's our North Stream. That is what we aspire to as a state. That when every child is finished attending school in the state of Nevada, that they are able to choose their future and having their future produced now. On one hand, we uphold the portrait of a learner. On the other hand, we have the reality or curricular scale. The challenge in between lies in operationalizing a set of key continuous improvement strategies that will enable us to reach your North Star, which we will always keep as a star. Next slide, please. Any continuous improvement strategy needs to be closely aligned with the root cause. Data in and of themselves are neutral and doesn't really tell a story. Data are numbers. The root cause tells us the story beneath the numbers, and any continuous improvement strategy must be aligned here. There's been a lot of research in the state in the last 3 to 5 years in the area of literacy and infrastructure as well as funding. And it tells a history of root causes around inequitable access, inconsistent access to both evidence-based, high-quality science reading in both curriculum and pedagogy, literal access to curriculum period, inconsistent alignments, and inconsistent MTSS or continuous feedback groups. So what you'll see in the set of continuous improvement strategies that I've laid out is a close alignment to these root causes and systemic barriers. Next slide, please. And there's been some fantastic work done to date. So with the portrait of the learner at the center, we have some incredibly deep resources, which let's get about the top. Statewide plan for the improvement of pupils, or the SIP, or the state's strategic plan. It's just what I've been calling it, rooted in the Nevada portrait of the learner, as well as the recently released Nevada State Literacy Plan and Senate Bill 460, each of which separately contains components with regards to both early learning and literacy. Everything from curriculum to pedagogy to access both facilities and capacity building and compensation. So as we move forward as a state, the trick is going to be in aligning these in a way that is cohesive and makes sense to the districts out there across the state. Next slide, please. And the fourth provision is that every single student in grades pre-K through 3 and beyond, in fact, has consistent access to evidence-based, high-quality, early literacy learning. The theory of action here, working theory of action, is that if we ensure that every child, every classroom across the state has access to this guaranteed and viable curriculum that is purely evidence-based, we will then shift the needle for students and close access and opportunity gaps. Next slide, please. These next two slides outline key continuous improvement strategies, as I previously mentioned, aligned with responses. The first strategy is, and I'm referring to as a seat at the table, is quite early that, ensuring that our youngest learners have access, both in terms of facility, the literal facility access, as well as the high quality programmatic access, particularly for our littlest learners across the state by early. So that's the key strategy, is ensuring access to littlest learners, those who have historically lacked access. Strategy number two, evidence-based instruction. We know a lot about the first step in literacy instruction. In the last 5+ years, there's been a revolution around evidence-based approaches to early literacy instruction. It's excellent work done in this day as well. We have a pretty good idea of what works. The curriculum, pedagogical approaches, it's in ensuring that it is delivered in every classroom across the state, so that every child can access that mission. Strategy number three, teachers are at the center of any improvement efforts we are going to have. And I'm not just saying that because I'm married to one, who reminds me of it every day, but because teachers are where the rubber meets the road. There's strong evidence that the person who has the least impact on student learning is the teacher. It is therefore essential that classroom teachers feel both confident and equipped to step into their classrooms every day to deliver that high quality literacy instruction, which requires capacity building in multiple modes. That's reading certification, coaching, mentoring, just-in-time support, ensuring that our educators across this state are supported and empowered to deliver that instruction is critical. Next slide, please. So on the one hand, you have the delivery of the evidence-based instruction consistently for every child in the state. On the other hand, you have the necessity for feedback. And so it is essential that every teacher, every principal, every superintendent, everybody body of evidence that's real time and relevant that can inform their decision-making processes, so that then they can scale what's working effectively and make adjustments and provide interventions for things like strategy number 5, centering families. Families are every child's first teacher. And it's essential that families across the state have access to resources in multiple languages so that they can then support rich literacy learning at home. And last but not least, aligning policy, funding, and as I previously mentioned, there's a vast body of research in the STEM, SLP, Senate Bill 460, there's a lot of purpose along the state. The trick is ensuring that it's aligned in a cohesive manner, which is going to be really essential. Next slide, please. In order to bring to life these continuous improvement strategies, we must have what I call enabling circumstances for the districts and SPCA around the state. What I mean by that is there are 17 unique districts in this state, as well as the SPCA, each of which have their own history, own set of unique challenges. And so it's really essential that there be a menu option of resources to support districts. From very low to low in Clark County to above that, and everything in between across the state. The diversity of the districts in the state is what makes it so. And support must be tailored in a way that is menu option and that we're capitalizing on statewide engagement strategies. Also, the scaling and establishment of the education service centers holds a lot of potential, contextualizing just-in-time support of the region. Next slide, please. What you're looking at now is a timeline that aligns policy and practice, the implementation of the work we do for the state in a way that will enable us to put ourselves, I like the term political state. And a lot of these pieces exist. Not like I made them up, but they exist and they're The trick is just gonna be to avoid. We'll keep saying, he should. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I went to the doctor last week and I had a physical, and at that physical, the doctor took my blood pressure, weighed me, drew some blood, got my heart rate, and those pieces of evidence taken together gave me an indicator of my overall flat health. No one of those measures can tell a full story of my. Same analogy holds true for this. There is no one measure that's going to tell the full story of early literacy in the state. And it's really essential that districts and teachers, grade level PLCs, superintendents have access to a some of which would be very predictable by state assistance source, but also deep on-one conversations. All of this taken together will inform the process because it's iterative, never really done. And so it's not so much top down as it is. We want educators to have access to rich and robust information to inform their instruction every day. So this represents a lot of things. Next slide, please. Okay, so the money. So the state of Nevada really has done some transformative work in the way that you think about the people-centered plan. And the resources are not limited, of course, by Bill City compared to many states. The layered and weighted approach which you think about for people funding is innovative compared to many other states, including one of them. So as we think about moving forward in a way that has certain financial impact, we have to just remember that budget is an ethical document. The budget tells a lot about the values of taxation, and the state has chosen tax revenues, which is a thoughtful, and the resources are not. It's going to require a layered approach to link resources in a very strategic manner to ensure that children of the state have. That includes integrating pupil support along with targeted investments in early literacy, professional development, and facilities expansion. All of these components taken together in order to ensure that there's operational resources as well as the teacher compensation resources and professional development. Next slide, please. Which brings me to my last slide. As we think about the path forward for the state of Nevada, I am extremely optimistic. I'll just state again that the work that is happening in the area of many things, but specifically for this purpose house, in the area of early literacy and the commitment to some research in your state literacy plan, some work happening in your districts really is cutting edge. I don't know if you all feel that way, but from my perspective, it's cutting edge. So I do believe that we have people here in the state, the talent and resources to really make some changes for the children of the state are success. So I believe it's brings time and places data and it's ideas. Thank you. We'll just say the last 3 seconds, there's different things as an appendix on slide correct, should you wish to take. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Sanchez. You remain seated, have another sip of water, we'll submit our scores, and then we'll be back in just a moment. Perfect. Moving on, the board will now begin the 8 formal interview questions. Questions will be asked by different board members, and when you meet your 5-minute response limit, I will request you reach a summary for that item. Right, so your first question, what do you believe is the most pressing issue in Nevada education today, and how would you address it?
Literacy. If that wasn't fairly evident in my presence. I think what I would say is that I'm coming to be before you today with a strong track record of both evidence-based instruction and innovation. And so I'll talk more about that in some of the other responses. But at the end of the day, from my own experience as a student and my many years of working to support implementation and scaling it by system size, everything from very small to very large systems. I do believe the most pressing issue in this state and states is ensuring that every child has access to high quality literacy instruction and can read and to comprehend. And I say that because I do truly think that literacy is liberation. If you can't read, can't comprehend, nothing else is gonna matter. And so I go back to I'm always a teacher first, I think at heart. And this is where you'll probably see that I spent some years as a literacy coach coming through. I'll get quick about it, but it's true. I really do believe, and as I mentioned in my presentation, I do think there's been a lot of work done in the state. When I was digging into the state literacy plan that was just released, I mean, you can see teachers' fingerprints all over that and principal fingerprints, and there's some really good work there. And so I think what's promising for Nevada is that the way that research that has been done, some of the organizations supporting the work, still work happening out there in the districts really is quite remarkable. And you are starting to see kindergarten readiness begin to shift. You're just not seeing it on state assessment scores yet because we went for kindergarten. And I think that, you know, in having a body of evidence that includes things like that, but also iPad, provide some resources for diagnostic instructions. I think that addressing it is simply, well, it's not simple. It's not simple, but it is a cohesion challenge. It's a matter of ensuring that every educator has the curriculum and the pedagogy and the ongoing support to deliver that instruction and supporting sees, and that as a state, we have really rich feedback loops we can assess. So a lot of that I speak about that to reiterate what I already said. But that is what I believe is there are many things, many wonderful things happening in the state, but if the state really transforms literacy outcomes for students, everything else will follow suit.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here. Member Hughes, have our next question. How familiar are you with Nevada's Portrait of a Learner and relevant national frameworks? How would you ensure that Nevada's approach continues to evolve while remaining grounded in a whole child philosophy? And looking ahead, what's your vision for the Portrait of a Learner over the next 5 years, and how would you measure meaningful progress towards that vision?
I am very familiar. I do my homework, very thorough. And especially because I can't say much more, I just want for anybody that's tuning in today to know that I am very keenly aware that fit matters. And so I very thoughtfully looked at all the research and work in the state before I even consider applying, right? So much as you know that. And so I'm very familiar with the Portrait of a Learner, and it has many excellent dispositions that captured my attention the most is the empowerment. Because if students need their schooling experience in this state empowered, that's everything. I know many kids that don't feel empowered. I just want to anchor that, and I'm familiar with it. And I do think that it does stand as the North Star, and you backwards map. So the Portrait of a Learner tells us what we aspire to, and if not thoughtfully operationalized, it runs the risk of being a poster on the wall. which, you know, like any strategic plan, if it's not implemented and it's not actually used, it just becomes paper. I'm not suggesting that it is, but I am suggesting that's a risk. And so the challenge lies, so the portrait of a learner is excellent as it should be, is going to be in backwards mapping the strategies in order to help us achieve that goal, right? Some of those I outlined in the area of literacy, but there are others, college and readiness, there's a future of learning network, there's very exciting innovative work happening here in the state. But that has to be done collaboratively. So you hold the North Star, and then you work with districts and the FPCA to backwards map what does that actually look like in continuous improvement statements with a regular cadence, which scripturally already exists in this state. With the, it looks like right in 6 months, you're the state, right? So there's cadence in there. It's just in socializing that stuff to the state. Right, because I'm gonna guess, I don't know for sure, but just based on work that I've done so far, it's probably very inconsistent at this point, state by district, with regard to the utilization of the learner, you know, the knowledge or awareness of the state literacy plan. So in my thinking, it really, I'm gonna sound a little here, but it's the cohesion, it's bringing life to something rich in a way that is iterative and it's clear reflection states. And so that is a way of holding ourselves in every district and then also in the state. The district outcomes are the state outcomes, right? Just like for a school principal, their student outcomes are their for a superintendent, your district outcomes for your school, for the state, the school outcomes are managers. So it becomes operationalizing that in a collective.
Member Hudson, for the record, what is your strategic vision for improving outcomes in Nevada, particularly for underserved student groups such as our multilingual learners, students with disabilities, and students experiencing homelessness?
So I think that this is represented through, so when I say excellence, access, and innovation, this is the access part of the equation, right? Now, first I'll speak to a little bit of some of the work that is happening here, and then some of the work that I've done in this area. So when we think about providing support for students who have been historically underserved areas, there's a couple of components that are really, and I'll just say examples. So it's really important that students all have access to high quality tier one education. That is necessary, but it's not sufficient for all students. Okay, so it's like the foundation. And so that's why the tier one high quality evidence-based literacy instruction is really, really important, because we're not doing that, we're gonna get what I refer to as false positives within our multi-tiered systems of support. That means students that are telling us they need intervention when in fact they didn't have high quality instruction in the first place. So you really have to make sure that that's in place, and this is where we look at intervention support plans through multi-tiered systems of support, both social, emotional, and academics. And so that is the way that I think equity and student success begins with access in the first place, but we can't stop there. We then have to have feedback loops and a rich body of evidence talking to students to understand if they're not experiencing success, why that is, in a way that's diagnostic so that we can then get. So when you use the phrase, or you're going to use the phrase multi-tiered systems of support or MTSS, oftentimes that just sounds like a new initiative. It's a process. It's a process of building a strong house foundation. And the challenge there is that is harder than that's hard for grade level teams and PSCs. They're sitting together and they have to have access to the right information at the time. So I think about it through the tier one instructions, structures for educators to collaborate, districts to collaborate, leaders to collaborate, and access to the right information. So it's a combination of all of those things, which includes the tier one piece having, students being able to access culturally relevant instruction that's both high quality, whole notion of Windows and ears, that what they're learning at school, but also those feedback. And it has been my experience in my professional career that the devil is in the details. And what you wind up with is inconsistent feedback, so it's the consistency piece of it. Over the course of my career, I have of curriculum adoptions and launching district-wide systems of intervention support for both social inclusion. As an example, through the expansion of mental health assistance teams, PBIS structures, as well as academic MTSS systems. So the way that I think about it is really layered and is super process oriented, and that's as it should be. But supporting a process is much more challenging and cost than somebody is setting. And so that's the way I.
Thank you for your answer. This is Member Land for the record. Your next question is, describe a time you led a large-scale effort that significantly improved student outcomes. What measurable results did you achieve? What strategies did you use? And what was your goal? How did your efforts close achievement gaps across various student subgroups?
Yes, thank you. Over my career, I've worked at just about every state house. From being a teacher to a principal to overseeing teaching overseeing speech periods, now overseeing operations. And so when I read this question, I was kind of mulling over which response I want to provide, but I think I'm going to provide on this line with core foundation. And so the example that I will discuss is over the course of the past 5 years in my current setting, we have launched back-to-back both a totally different literacy curriculum pedagogical structures and math. And in this case, it was K-8. And we took on the challenge of launching math right as we're coming out of COVID, which some people might have thought was extremely ambitious. But the reason we did it was because our student outcomes were not at the end, especially for students. We felt like we couldn't wait. I mean, the kids couldn't wait. I suppose we could, but the kids sort of right. So in both of these instances, I'll talk through, and I've been through a lot of adoptions over the course of my career, everything, AP courses, kindergarten literacy, and everything. But these two were different in a couple of key regards. And so the first question is, and I'll use math as an example, with why are we doing it in Word? Like anytime you're gonna somebody to change something, you need to have some sort of consensus about why changing it in the first place. Because if you do not, you might get some compliance, but you're not going to get a shift in outcomes. All right, so we started with some deep research in what are our current outcomes in math and how do we feel about it? What do we feel about these? Do they tell us everything we need to know, and wherein lies the issue? And I cannot first say sometimes it's easy to skip over that part and get right to the curriculum adoption part, and not with the change basis, do not skip your rush by our change. With regard to math, start out discussed with them, and they also still work in line with the Commonwealth State Standards of Math, which is the issue. Right. And so we went through a comprehensive adoption process, adopted something that was pedagogically very different before. And but what we did differently was the capacity building. We created a whole system of support for the entire large system of the implementation of SNAP resources. By that I mean we created system. So across the system in our strategic plan, core elements of math. And then every school is required to have school plan. The state of Washington is required by the state. Every school and needs to have math elements. The PLCs have a math element, and then we cascaded all of the question. All of the PD, all of the leaders was around that. Teacher PD, regular PLCs, math. And then layered over that, our solution that gets 4 times a year. We had every school in the district over the course of 4 days, every history. And got just an implementation that quality data, what are kids seeing, seeing, talking to kids, what are you learning, what are you learning this? We compiled all of that. The result of that is we didn't really expect to see a shift in outcomes year one. We were really targeting the implementation as part of the LD implementation. And we did hit that mark, 99% of LD implementation across the district. But we did start to see a shift in outcomes. We did as early as the first semester, but highest growth for some of our students with disabilities, with students that are acquiring English, with students from learning backgrounds, with no lack for other students. So we replicated that program, but we replicated that structure with literacy, and we're now in year 2 of that. We folded in the space of reading, pedagogy, space for learners. So when I think about my role in it was system architect, strategic planner, but also I'm out there in classrooms observing instruction and providing that quality of feedback. And I'm really proud. I've been through a lot of adoption processes with many years that I've been involved in education. That is by far most, and it was the cohesion. It was the cohesion.
Thank you. Hello, doctors. I am Member Braxton, and I have your next question. This is group 1. How would you implement statewide initiatives across 17 districts? How would you balance both enforcement policy and measures? Also, to make strong collaborative relationships with districts.
Well, first, homework, okay, just let's talk a little bit. This is where I think the fact, when I said in my introduction that my background is very in a way that I wouldn't necessarily aware of tonight. This is where it's so valuable to me, and the fact that I have worked in the state of Texas. Right on Westminster and Haitian in Bellevue, Washington, which serves families from all over the globe, countries, I mean, and everything in between. My understanding context and my superintendent internship at a school district of 300. I'm now in a district that's, not like Clark County big, but big, right? So I worked as a high school teacher, middle school, elementary. This is where I do, I'm keenly aware of context. And you can't have one size fits approach to any key change initiatives. Well, you do need to have this, I call it boundaries, right? But you need to have some things. These are the things. But there's always context. So when you think about that, 17 districts and the charter, right? My context, Washington State is 249, like a lot of districts. 17 is manageable. And every district in the state is going to have its own personality and its own set of unique circumstances, and you have to explain that. So the way that I think about it is, this may sound sick, but I better count pigment. You can't get there. You have to just put in work. I'll tell you this, with any change initiative I've ever been a part of, the quantitative data is useful and involved. And very useful. But in my experience, the most important for understanding context and balance is the quality of data. And that is by sitting down with kids or a parent or a principal or a superintendent and hearing from their perspective. I learn more by leadership by monitoring. That's my technical term for it. I learned more by leadership by monitoring than anything else in my. So as we think about moving forward districts in this state, that is essential. Relationship building, deep listening, and there are some policy pieces that are in place. So the part 2 of that is any sort of change that you have, there's always going to be a certain group of individuals that are worried that something's going to improve that. And some of those things are within the spirit of system. So I think about Sarah Hammond uses the phrase informed commander, which really like to use standards, but that just means high expectations and high standards. Right? So I would be coming into this position with super high expectations of myself and those that I work with and support, because the children of this state deserve nothing less. But I also would be coming in with high. So as we think about enforcing policy and accountability, I don't so much think about it as forcing, as in coming alongside together. And there needs to be feedback loops, so we do need to. So again, it's gonna be these 2 points, like early literacy is an example. But we do need to have guaranteed by curriculum around space reading and conversation, right? There's evidence behind that. So if there's, if there's a location where they're saying, we're just not gonna do that. That's pretty soon we're gonna need to work through, because that's not gonna be. I mean, they can have support, I have support, but there has to be some non-negotiables with support. Because as we think about balancing the two, it is a combination of good points and making sure that everybody has in. But then what are the supports? It's a very high support, but also high expectation way of learning. And building relationships is iterative. I mean, so it's just one of those superintendent usual calls, trips, one-on-one meetings, but then there's also a lot of the less relationship things. What you want is for everybody to have same environments. And to also have space where if something legitimately is not working, I mean, we need districts to be able to share that. Because we need to be able to provide it for the sake of the students. So that's the way that I think about, there is the enforcement part and ourselves and the accountability part, but those things exist for a reason. Accountability is feedback. Accountability is feedback. I expect the feedback. I always like the feedback I get, but it helps me. So that's the way that I that's the way that I would enter into relationship, state, and a balanced approach.
The last thing that I want to Dr. Sanchez, can you please provide a summary statement?
Yeah,
Thank you.
the last thing that I want to say, is I do also think it's to additional spiritual spirit innovation that exists in this state, because it is balancing the curiosity and innovation is for just
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. Member Austin Owens with part 2 of this question. As state superintendent, how would you leverage state policy, funding, and partnerships to create the conditions that improve educator retention across Nevada's diverse districts?
Yes. Educator retention, especially for hard to fill positions like special education's sort of it's annual challenge. And so I think about it through a multi-pronged task. So when I think about educator retention, there's the onboarding and then there's the retention. So there have been some increases, especially in the last 3 years, around 4 people leaving all the teachers categories and recently teachers categories as well. And that's and nobody goes into education to be a teacher to make tons of money, but they do need to be able to have a living wage, right? Like I think most people to get a teacher, but they do need to be able to have a wage because people have families they're supporting. So proof is in looking at our budgets, working with both the legislature and partners around, are we in terms of market competitive for teachers' salaries and also leaders, and looking at pooling funding mechanisms for that. The other thing that I want to say budget wise that's important is the retention part, because it says to around over time. What is the salary package look like for educators across the state over time? Okay, so having an adequate salary is important, but it doesn't necessarily keep the retention part. So I'm always been a big supporter of mentoring programs and also programs. And we've had great success with those in other areas. And that would be, so somebody that's a paraeducator, for example, providing structured opportunities for them to earn their teaching credential. Or something like that is an important part of both growing your own and retention. Now, your districts are going to have challenges like Clark County. Clark County is going to have some challenges over district, right? So I really do think about it through the state lens and funding lens as around the budget conversation. And that, anytime you have biennial legislature, there's going to be a lot of work into that piece. And there's also the partnerships part. So there's the ensuring that we are competitive and that the larger community understands why increase, which is a really big part. That's a really big part of the equation. But then also how we bring with both extra partners like Teach for America, things like that, universities and organizations, so that we can then get some additional investment to building the capacity and especially starting with my.
Morning, Walker. Share an example of a time when you had to make difficult budget decisions to align with strategic priorities. In response, please describe how you managed constraints, secured stakeholder buy-in, and how your experience prepared you to navigate Nevada's unique educational funding structures and governance model.
This is an excellent question, and this is something that I'm living and breathing right now. My current role is chief operating officer, so I will just. So I'm coming from the state of Washington, which everybody's aware of, but at the state level, we have been working through some structural funding issues, not just the district that I'm in, but the whole district around inflation, which is not that same, as well as rising costs for transportation, special education, all the declining events. So we've had this challenge, right, around expenses rising and revenues not rising. Okay. In addition to that, we had last fall a change in our leadership team where the person who was overseeing our finances left the district. So we found ourselves in a very unique situation where we abruptly realized that our revenues were certainly not going to meet the needs of our expenses. And so that aligned with my transition into the chief operating officer, with the specific task of being a key part of the fiscal recovery plan. And so we had to, I'm mentioning all of this because we had to very quickly figure out how we were going to go about making very difficult decisions and what our priorities would be. What I think is important for this board and anybody listening to understand is that we went back to our strategic goals and our core values, because as I mentioned previously, a budget is an ethical document, which really is. And so there were a lot of things we could have done. And there were some things we intentionally chose not to do. We aligned our reductions plan to our place. What I mean by that is we did not eliminate key programs that we felt were essential for our students, any of them. And in fact, we added some innovative ones. And we looked for other ways to make exceptions, right? So the central office is half the size that it was before. We did have to reduce building administrators very dramatically. We did have to make some really difficult decisions, but what we did not do is we did get rid of our high school 7-period pay. As an example, the state is paid for it because it provides our students lots of flexibility with courses and we did not reduce or minimize any of our programs. In fact, by program because for Japanese, which just launched in August, because what we found is that we were getting some feedback and cut everything, but the spirit is around innovation and success for students. So we align decisions with key decisions. Let's keep it in this bolster way in which we were about doing that was we did 100 listening sessions in literally 10 days. To get information from every school in the community and just sit down, pile that information, work closely with our board of directors who are incredible, and we put together a board approved study. Only after my time with the community, getting copious feedback and aligning it next to our then we made the decisions about which budget, the very difficult budget cuts that we did have to make. And the last thing is work with our legislatures to enact some changes to state law that are truly transformative. Just as one example, one which enables us, previously this was not a law, enables the district to sell a piece of property and take the proceeds from that sale to the general budget store. And so we worked with at the policy level, in order to accomplish that as well. So, I'm living and breathing it right now. Next to consolidate, having led consolidation of schools, these are the two most challenging things. Is leading the school health. And but instead of it being 10 years, it's going to be it's coming back to the core values and keeping the difficult decisions as far from children as possible, not letting sanctification in tight times, because that's the last thing we hear.
Thank you. Member or for the record, I'd like to ask you a final question, which is how would you collaborate with State Board of Education to ensure alignment on priorities and shared outcomes? In your response, please describe those you would engage, such as students, legislators, state agencies, community and business patrons, and how you would ensure that student voice meeting forms and state level decision.
Okay, so just quickly, I think about the State Board of Education and your state superintendent of instruction as a partnership. And I think an understanding of the governance model that we're bringing up is really. As a state board, you have a strategic plan. You also have some more around students graduating with a credential, ultimately relating this credential. And I think it's important as we enter a relationship together that we think about the existing priorities of which there are, and then the annual updating, is going to be the quarterly updating happening around that, as well as our relationship. The reason that I mentioned that is, as a state, you set the policy of direction, and I work with that, and my job really is to bring that to life. My job is implementing the direction that the board has set and that we work together. My dream as a state superintendent of construction is to bring to life policy. And so it's important that, there's overlap there, but that's a balanced governance approach. And I think it's important to know that I'm aware of that and that I think it just helps to work better as a team. And so during that process, so essentially it's let's take the SIP as an example. That document exists, there's quite a lot in there, right, around things to be accomplished. So the direction has been set. And then in terms of leadership, my responsibility is then to engage school district superintendents, the teachers, the authority, broader community, students around socializing some of the policy that has been set to make sense of it. So that then we are able to actually one of that is project management is so much more adaptive. One of the criticisms that sometimes state education get is that it's from state. It's one of the risks that there's some criticism across states and state puts less paper and then nothing actually. And I do think there are states in which my job is to make that law. And to work with people in the community around the accomplishment. So I think that is a very adaptive process. And I think it requires an awful lot of like coming alongside the state as well. And that includes pretty much every constituent that you can imagine, from the government itself, of course, to legislators, to business partners, to students, to principals, to community, to agencies, and all of it though is around socializing what it is we're trying to push and how we're going to go about it. So that's the way that I think of it, and it's an iterative. My responsibility is to keep people based on what's going and what's right, so that we can then continue to work closely as humans. The collective responsibility is together look at the feedback we're getting from the ecosystem, so that we can then make adjustments. Now, it's a state's large place. 17 districts, a lot of districts, charter schools, it's a lot of constituencies. And so that is the challenge. It's easy enough to set policy. It's bridging that into practice. And that is over career and education. The continuous improvement process has been my area of expertise many years now. And bridging that into actual implementation so that walk into even as a classroom, to walk into the classroom you happen to be sitting in, that there's an understanding of the state of.
Great, wonderful. Reached the end of the questions. Thank you for providing thoughtful responses. I will now ask the board if there are any clarifying questions they would like to ask. Okay, seeing that. On behalf of the board, thank you for your interest in serving as the next state superintendent of public instruction. Do you have any closing comments you would like to share?
I think I would just like to share another gratitude. I'm so grateful to be here with you all today. And I think that this is, you know, you will have a decision ahead. And I know that you don't too. And I want to thank you for your patience because I have the last interview slide. So you sat through a number of interviews now. And I'm just really grateful to be here and to have met you and to have an opportunity to hopefully help you understand why I do work and why I'm so passionate about it. And I just appreciate each and every one of you for your service because you're not in these roles either. Each of you in different capacities. And this is a really exciting opportunity. So I wish you absolutely the best with your preparations, and nothing would please me more than to move forward, but I have deep respect for your success. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. And with that, we appreciate your time. Welcome. I hope you have a nice visit here in Nevada. And board, we will submit our scores. And after that, well, in the meantime, we'll be taking a lunch break. So we will resume back here with our meeting at 11:55 for our second public comment period and our deliberation. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what they fix this. Right, so. Yeah, I try to get it. Right. That's all I can get it. I can't. Okay. I've done it. Well, all 3 hours. No. Should be new.
You're checking her map.
Yes, right. That's fine. That's fine, that's fine. That's. She's. Yes.
That's okay. It's over 100 feet south. It's here. National. See. Yeah, wait, no. It's downloading though, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Yes, it all. It's, no. It has not attached. Oh, there you go. Okay, I was getting nervous because I was like, never. Board members. Yes. Today. Yeah. That. Or.
Yes, send that, just in case he wants to.
Yeah, just pay us to know. Wait, six. We do. Right.
Thank you.
You too.
Almost covered. Solar.
And she was just fine. She was like, oh, really? So it was like, oh.
Something's like. Sort of like better attention. Almost in. She only discuss communicate with you. Is the score sheet that you'll be discussing when you get to that. Sure, I just want to make sure you had access. Not everybody has like the database. Yeah. Okay. Since you use whatever's on the communicate. Gmail is Gmail, your DOE. So my advice that has this. Yeah, or we can send it to your device. Well, it's okay, right, because this document is nothing, it's only the reference material. So if it's ever asked for, we would be purchasing. Oh, that's the thing, we would, yes, we send it to my. Just as the pictures. This is. Yes, we very just. Show me the choice. Shake it. Yes. Well, it's so you should. That's wait. Yeah. We have this one. It's just it's my it's make it pretty. It doesn't. It doesn't. No, great. You want to share the tire. You can. That's happening. Oh, I see. Do this. There's a little sign strip. So you can, yes, it will. Just.
No, we're gonna explain just the it's all your source. If it's source goes to be defining.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome back in person, and to those of you who are listening online, we will resume our meeting now at 12:01. I will now open agenda item 4, before moving on to our final agenda item, in which the board will select 3 candidates to move forward to the governor for consideration as Nevada's next superintendent of public instruction. Okay, so the second public comment, each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and time will be monitored by Vice President Hughes. Written public comment may also be submitted to the board secretary at nvboarded@doe.nv.gov. Public comment can also be made by telephone by calling 669-900-6833 or 888-475-4499 with a meeting ID number of 865-1118-1570. Public comment will be limited to the 3 minutes, and if when read into the record, if the time exceeds 3 minutes, they will be part of the submitted for public viewing. If the comments, any comments submitted after the board has officially adjourned will not be included after we move on from this agenda item. We will begin with any members of the public who have attended in person, and we will begin in Carson City. Is there anyone up north who would like to provide in-person public comment?
Madam Chair, there are no public comments in Carson City at this time.
Thank you very much. And down here in this room, I see no in-person public comments. Madam Secretary, has anyone submitted public comments online?
We have no other comments that have been submitted online at this time.
Okay, are there any callers in the queue waiting to provide public comment?
Thank you, President Don Weiler. Calling this open. Conference this time.
All right, thank you very much. Having no public comment for our second public comment period of this meeting, we will move on to agenda item 5. At this time, the board will deliberate on the qualifications, interview performance, and score rankings of the 6 candidates interviewed for the position of State Superintendent of Public Instruction. The board has all now received the aggregate scores for our 6 candidates, and we will be using that as part of our discussion. Following our deliberations, the board may take action to select 3 finalists whose names will be forwarded to Governor Lombardo for consideration and appointment. The board also has the opinion to submit a narrative alongside our recommendations, which may include an ordered preference and rationale to further inform the governor's decision. It's also the purview of the board to just submit the 3 names, along with any of the other public documents will be available to help inform its decision. I encourage members to reference their notes, scoring sheets, and any observations from both the performance task and the interview components. This discussion is intended to be collaborative, and I ask that members share both their individual perspectives and any points of consensus as we move toward final action. And with that, I will open up the floor for discussion. Member Braxton.
And so the numbers that we're seeing is average for each section.
Member Braxton, while we get some clarification.
Member Braxton, would you please repeat your question?
Sure. The scores that we see is this average for each section. The scores that you see are the total numbers. So we gave you the total number of scores for each particular category, and then gave you the total number of scores not.
So just so everyone can follow along with what we're looking at the total scores for our 6 candidates. If we're looking at the 3 highest scoring individuals, we would be looking at we have Dr. Wakefield and Dr. Sanchez and Dr. Coombs. Those would be looking at just the top 3 scorers. In the final column, that would be combining both the performance task and the 8 interview questions. Those appear to be our top 3 candidates. I'm looking for any feedback from the board if this is representative of the names that you feel would be the top 3 candidates that we could potentially provide to the governor.
This is Member Walker, and I would say those are my 3 candidates.
Thank you, Member Walker. Would anyone else like to provide their feedback?
Just so the rest of these are not my candidates. And
Well, to clarify for members, it's our duty to provide the top 3 candidates that we think would do the best job, not the top 3 scorers. So if there are names that we need to deliberate who would best serve the students of Nevada, then we can have those conversations. So please feel welcome to bring any of those candidates forward.
Sure, Member Braxton, for the record, I think should reach to community and to be she was considering the specific examples that she gave, problems and those subsequent solutions to address problems faced, such as budget issues, budget crises, lack of funding, and obtaining feedback from various stakeholders. And that's
Thank you, Ms. Frankston. Any other members?
Yes, Member Rose for the record. I really liked the references back to the efficiency study from Dr. Wyatt. And I feel like he has a pretty good pulse of Nevada. I thought it was apparent that he's been here in Nevada, and I think he has a pretty good understanding of some of our current challenges.
Thank you, Member House. Member Hughes.
Yes. Thank you, President Blackwell. Member Hughes for the record. This is just I thought I was going to share less on a specific candidate, but just more on something that I think is important for us to consider, and particularly for the governor to consider. So I have personally worked with lots of districts and states and schools across the country, and one of the dilemmas and challenges that continually comes up as we think about how do we improve outcomes and experiences for kids is really that gap between theory and practice. I think Dr. Sanchez mentioned that in her presentation, that there are a lot of good ideas out there, a lot of research out there, and everybody has access to that, obviously, but like rates of improvement are not equally distributed because the implementation gap is often the thing that systems really struggle with. And how do you align the pieces, and how do you understand the real experience of practitioners on the ground so that you can develop strategies and implementation approaches that really speak to the ways in which we can get change to happen in large complex systems. So I think, it was interesting to hear from the candidates. Some people took very much like a strategic lens and a systems level thinking lens, but maybe had less of the practitioner understanding on the ground. Others are really leading from a place of experience, having been in different roles, and thinking about leveraging those experiences to be able to inform, how we can sort of push and support And so I just wanted to offer that as like some observations that I have had across many systems. That is often where large systems, and particularly departments of education, sometimes are less successful, is because we can't figure out that right balance of theory and practice. And so whomever the candidate is, and if the governor's interviewing folks, I would really hope that he would really pay close attention in sort of what his vision is and what the right combination of factors might be. Because I think we do have some candidates, including those that are numerically in the top 3, who sort of skew on different sides of that continuum of either sort of like deep theory or deep practice, and what does he think is going to take to sort of marry the two. Thank you.
Member Braxton for the record, this was a wonderful opportunity to see how those were interpreted by each. This is definitely not an easy decision to make, and I see expect a vast experience that each of the has, that is to be acknowledged. Each brings wonderful to the table, stuff. The key on all of them be one. So this was a very tough decision to make.
Jennifer Hudson for the record. My only concern for one of the candidates is just because we had some issues with budgeting with Coop, that the lack of the long stability of a budget plan and just her awareness. That and then her plans beyond like the secondary strategies. Like she had a good foundation of when it came to early childhood, but then beyond that, what is that going to look like for our students? Because we're trying to get them college and career ready. So then I didn't really feel comfortable with that aspect of it. But our candidates was really good. It's just we've got to fine tune out like that budget. We have issues with our budgeting and just being able to allocate more money for our students. And then when it comes to I know we're looking at pre-K, but then beyond those pre-K, what are the strategies for that as well?
Thank you, Member Hudson. Member Braxton?
For Braxton, for the record, it was interesting to hear the practical application based on experience from the classroom to more managerial positions. I think the classroom experience gave a way of understanding implementation that was, I think, useful, considered our particular climate, and in understanding budget constraints, which be creative with addressing budget constraints. I saw that with some kids.
I just wanted to say, and for our record, that I think Dr. Whitfield and Dr. Sanchez both did a really great job of digging into the data and making sure that they were really addressing some of the issues that I think our state has faced. Some of the issues that were brought up in the efficiency study, but also the real lack of cohesiveness in our planning, and both really brought up the need to align all of the priorities in ways that are manageable and understandable for teachers in the classroom, parents on the ground, and leadership throughout the state. So I felt like those two candidates really shone through to me as people who had taken a lot of time to understand that context and recognizing some of the weaknesses that could become strengths in education was paramount.
Thank you, Member Orr. I would like to agree with those points that you made relative to those two candidates. They also stood out as very strong to me, both in their ability to research and understand the issues unique to Nevada, and then how they could apply their unique expertise at various levels to best serve our students and educators. And another candidate that stood out to me as well was mentioned by Member Braxton, Dr. Mitchell, her understanding and then her unique perspective that she could bring to our students and families and communities, I think holds a high value. Any other members? Like to speak? Member Dawson Owens.
Sure, thank you. I would agree with the things that have been said, and I am comfortable with the process. I'm grateful that, as when we had the original 19, there was a dividing line, as board members, to see where our top 6 by ended up. And I feel like we have the same situation here, with the top 3, despite other candidates having, certain things that would obviously bring great, value to Nevada, and I would, encourage them to find other ways to continue on in Nevada if they are not selected today, because they all have some great qualities that we can benefit from. But I'm comfortable with the top 3, and I had a tie in my core, but I'm okay with what's presented here. So
Yes, Member Land, please. We definitely value your perspective.
This is Member Land for the record. I'd like to say that I agree with all the points that have been made so far. Personally, I believe that the top 3 so far and Dr. Mitchell have shown to be extremely collaborative with the student voice, and I really appreciate that. And based off what I'm seeing, I'm pretty comfortable with the top 3 as of now, just because I appreciate their acknowledgement of student voice that's been made extremely apparent. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Member Land. Thank you for calling out the importance of student voice and really highlighting the candidates that spoke to you relative to that. Member.
Listening to the discussion, we've had some concern noted about Dr. Coons, and then some people pushing for Dr. Mitchell. And so in my mind, that might warrant a conversation of that 3rd spot, which would be a better fit for Warren and to send forward to the governor.
Walker, I appreciate your ability to summarize our thoughts and then present us with a path forward. Thank you for that. Well, are there any oppositions or any suggestions if we were to move forward the 2 candidates that they haven't heard any reason not to move forward, Dr. Wakefield or Dr. Sanchez? There seems to be agreement amongst the board on those 2 candidates, and the proposal, not a motion, but the conversation about potentially which name would we move forward in addition to those 2? Would it be Dr. Mitchell or perhaps Dr. Coons? Would the board like to weigh in on their perspectives about that? Member Hughes.
Member Hughes, one thing, I think I personally still, again, generally agree with the top 3 that landed numerically. The way I was thinking about this, because I think it is a good question, Member Walker, is I think for any of the 3 candidates, or any of those 4 candidates, either there's going to be a steep learning curve, right? Like either because you've never led at the state level or in a complex government agency, or because you may lack some other, right? So as I thought about that, I thought okay, somebody who might have less Nevada context is also going to have a learning curve. But I felt like Dr. Coons was coming, I think the only candidate out of the 6 who has actual state level executive experience. So to me, while there are Nevada differences, you sort of know how things, so I was thinking what's the pace of learning? And knowing that we're at a critical junction in Nevada, we can give people some grace period, but I don't know that we can wait forever for the learning curve. And so I was thinking about who would be most likely to be able to jump in to sort of the core functions of their role on the most accelerated timeline. So that's why I felt comfortable with the top 3 is I was thinking about that learning curve. But again, I think very important things that people found about Dr. Mitchell and some of the assets. I will say one of the things that I liked about Dr. Mitchell, if I think about the lens of sitting in front of families and communities, as someone who's deep in the education ecosystem, I was able to follow what most folks were talking about. But I think Dr. Mitchell was able to communicate in a way that is more accessible to the general public. And that is also an important skill of a state level leader because you are thinking about that constituent base. So that was one of the things that stood out to me with her candidacy.
And I would say, I felt that about both candidates today, so Dr. Sanchez also, her ability to just make it real and come across as a person, an educator, a part of the community, I think. I felt very comfortable with the presentation of the same reasons.
In regards to the record, and so I heard what my colleagues mentioned, I have my order at this station and answering questions. So, I see a cash flow. I see your and appreciation here, but they seem to be true state strongly students and their parents, our students first, and students. I felt that Dr. Pinch was able to convey that. Give that and plus, but I give a plus to every kid.
So what I'm hearing is regarding the two candidates, Dr. Coons and Dr. Mitchell, is that in terms of a fit for the climate and the relatability and the ability to connect with constituent groups, that perhaps Dr. Mitchell might be a stronger fit in those regards, which are not something that is necessarily a numeric value on any of our rubrics, but something qualitatively that we can add to the scoring and consider that might potentially make her a better candidate. Member Walker.
I'm wondering, but since if it's coming down to a discussion of those two and, member health might, all those mentioned another candidate that he might want to advocate for. If it comes down to between those two, I'm wondering if it would be appropriate for the president to kind of and go from there and see where money. We don't truly know which way the improvements would do.
Point Member Walker. Member else, did you want to? Not to put you on the spot, I'm sorry. Member Walker mentioned you might have another candidate to speak on. I just wanted to make sure you had opportunity to do that if so choose.
Thank you. Member else for the record, I very much agree with everybody. I think we were very fortunate. We got some very great candidates and this is a good situation to be in. I do just like the relatability. I think if Dr. White has experience in Nevada, I think this could be a to us. And somebody that knows our systems. However, I'm very, very pleased with our entire candidates.
Member Dawson Owens.
Thank you, Member Dawson. I would agree about Dr. Wyatt and I have pause about just undoing the scores. And I know it's not just the scores, but it's hard for me to justify like why we switched someone out when this is what we came to, and I'm open for that discussion. I share Member Hughes's concern as well, and while the other the number 4 and number 5 have great potential, I tend to want to go with what we kind of talked about and for the reasons that we did. So that's where I would lean with those top 3, and still even with those top 3, we can see a big differential between 1 and 2 and 3, right? 3 are tied there. So I'm very comfortable just with letting the scores lay out where they are, and appreciate the conversation about Dr. Mitchell and Wyatt as well. That's where I'm landing.
Looking at my board members, thinking they want to have some additional comment. Member Hudson.
Member Hudson.
I agree with what everyone is saying, but I also have concerns. Like, I understand we went through a break, but then we also have to talk about, like, how that person is going to fit in with our community, especially with, like, even on my little notes. If you're looking at Coons, hopefully I scored right, but like her diversity, like we have a diversity group of students. I need someone that's gonna be able to lead my students correctly. And have experience leading diversity, like diverse students. Along with that, understanding the system when it came to, I think it's Dr. Mitchell, excuse me, she knew our state, even though, yes, the lens, she knew from the portrait of learner, but she experienced some diversity. And that aspect, I understand scores are scores, but then when we're talking and when they're presenting themselves, that other things came about that made me like, wish I could go back and like, from yesterday, because these candidates highlighted other things that I felt the superintendent needed to lead our state. So right now, knowing that my state is diverse and that candidate didn't mention as many, she didn't have the strategies needed to lead our students. At the end of the day, it's about the students. I don't care about a number because if that's the case, our test scores doesn't show. If we look at numbers, those numbers doesn't show what our students or our teachers are capable of doing. So yes, we have a rubric of some things, but at the same time, what is best for our students? And right now, I just feel a leader that has a good understanding of a portrait learner, our framework, our steps, also how to relate to the community, because that is one of our issues about being transparent, meeting our families where they need it. And if I have to go back and forth with those two candidates, I would say Mitchell would be the best candidate in that aspect. Not looking at just numbers, but looking at the whole picture, the whole candidate.
Thank you, Member Hudson. Very well said. Thank you so much. Just for clarification, Deb, is it possible to send forward more than 3 candidates? Or are we limited to just the 3?
Thank you, President. Unfortunately, the statute does say pretty clearly that the governor is to select from a list of 3 names submitted by the state board. So I think you are limited to 3. You could probably do some ranking or some other explanation or send evaluation materials, but I don't think you can deviate by sending more plus 3.
Thank you, Member Dawson Owens.
Well, I wonder if we could send that forward then to say that, you know, we have the top score, our first candidate, our second and third candidates were tied for this, and there was another candidate that we were very interested in, and this is their score. Just setting that. And obviously include the other 2 rankings, I guess.
Member Walker.
Member Walker, and yes, we just had a similar conversation with sending forward my replacement for this board, or the options for my replacement for this board. And I think that, like I said to the group at NASP, I'll say to us, I think being a leader means you have to lead. And if we're called on to name 3 names, I think that we as a board name those 3 names. And your job, I think that sometimes we have to make a choice. That's what our job is. So it's hard, and there's a lot of candidates that we listen to that could lead this state successfully. And I think we have to send the top 3 and let the governor use his wisdom to pick who's going to be best for our education system.
Thank you, Member Walker. On that note, I would like to share that my top 3 rankings would be Dr. Wakefield, Dr. Sanchez, and Dr. Mitchell. I think those 3 candidates had the most closely aligned vision for the future of the education of our state. Are there any other candidates who would like to, or excuse me, board members who would like to share? Member Wilkinson. Great. Great.
Member Hudson. Member Hudson, I feel that, like, I agree with you too. My top three, after reviewing everyone, would be Dr. Mitchell, Wakefield, and Sanchez.
I don't know if it's appropriate for us to have a recess for us to be able to look back through our documents or notes and to kind of just refresh before we. That, is that possible, or is there appetite for that?
Member Dawson Ellers, we can absolutely do that. We can take a 5-minute recess. It's now 12:30. We will resume at 12:35.
Teacher insurance. Did you take separate filter tests as that?
It is 12:45, and we will resume our meeting. Everyone has had an opportunity to revisit the candidates and their scores, so I will look to board members. Does anyone have any additional comments that they would like to share at this time? I am not seeing anyone with anything pressing they'd like to bring up, but I would like to ask questions. Are there any concerns or immediate concerns that are not being reflected in the scores here, but that you feel that would warrant discussion about any of the candidates or anything on a positive note that's not reflected? Conditions and discussion.
Trying to think of this is I'm really on any of the units, which gives me slight pause. I position passing people on before I've done that. So I know that the governor's office will do all of that background report, but I think it's important to say that I don't feel 100% comfortable not having been able to call references or things like that. One area that gave me pause in the initial screening, paper screening, was that Dr. Cruz has seemed to around every few years in leadership positions. And that could be because she's looking for just a fit. And maybe that would be that, but I definitely think that we deserve some consistency and long-term support. So that would be one thing. As for Dr. Mitchell, I felt that she was friendly, easy. Like I feel that she would do a great job communicating with stakeholders across the state, and yet I don't know that she has the same level of statewide data analysis and statewide problem solving. So I think that there would be quite a big lift for her to come into a role like this and understand the major changes that need to be made. But I do agree that our Department of Education really needs someone that is going to bring people together too, and both internally and external stakeholders. So I know that I did just give an opinion about which is best, but I do think that I have slight concerns about both of the candidates, but I also think they solve different. It's right, like they're hiring of each of them to solve different.
Thank you, Member Orr, for those comments, and thank you for bringing forward two things that we had not yet talked about. So thank you for highlighting those. Member Hudson?
Member Hudson. Member Hudson, thank you, Member Orr, for bringing that, because that was one of my concerns. I don't want to bring up, I did my research, and that was one of my concerns with cool stuff that her inconsistency. And I just don't want anyone, I was somebody that's going to invest, because I know our state we're making headlines, and we're doing great things here. I just don't want anyone just to leave us. And I seen that in her track record. That was not my concern, or at least one of my concerns when it comes to that. Just someone to really invest in our community.
Thank you, Member Hudson. Any other board members? Comments? Seeing no additional comments or points of deliberation. Is there someone who would be willing to make a motion?
The motion.
Yes, and to be clear, we do not have to take a motion, but at some point we do need to take a motion on the 3 days. If people are not set on who they are ready to move forward, we definitely need to continue this conversation and deliberate. That's why I keep looking to my board members here. If there's anything that we need to bring up or talk about, things that left unsettled, if there's still questions, we need to have that conversation.
Steve's here. meetings each school and our candidates each efforts to address what we presented to them. There may be other additional information in your background, expertise, their experience that may not be presented. Certain questions were answered. I felt that each candidate did their best to answer the question to me. That being said, there are nuance also, right? And then nuance that relatability that you, which was the expertise in answering questions. They didn't come across with the whole portion, the question and answer portion. So regardless of their particular experience and perspective, how they were to answer questions, said how it was delivered, I believe, was the extra layer of understanding that we needed to have an each candidate in the event of crises. So let's go to the worst case scenario. We're in a situation where there's another COVID after something else. Crises. What would it look like? To appreciate the specific examples in certain candidates given and their crises and address. I also appreciate participative leadership, right? Again, reaching out to teams and knowing that collaboration across the state was necessary. So there was not a specific question or issue regarding that. Yet that was also expressed. Interesting.
Member Orr?
This is member Aura. So as we're going back through, I can tell you that one of the reasons why, as much as I relate to really like Dr. Mitchell, I did provide her with a lower score on one section, and that was the budget. But I think what I see here is clearly someone who has lots of district level experience and sees the budget from the district level. So like offering teacher pay incentives and buying broadband and things like that, which are things that you could work with the legislature on, but might not necessarily be within the state's budget and guidelines. And so I think that that's just one area where I felt like there would be a big learning curve just because of the way that our system works. State.
Thank you, Member Orr. And I think it's important to highlight too, in addition to all that was learned today, the board has been in possession of the candidates' application materials and the different documents that they submitted. We've had time to review those for the past several weeks. So just putting that context out there for everyone listening and online too, that while it is a lot about what we're learning today, a lot of the information that we are using to make these decisions has been shared with us. We have that information. Member Hughes.
Thank you. Members of the record. The other thing just I would stress that I think is important for us to consider, and unfortunately we don't have tons of data about this. I know the board talked about this. It was on the initial application rubric. There's some indirect measures, but all of them are going to need to hire a strong team, or think about the full team at NDE and sort of, hopefully supplement where they may have fewer skills. And so again, we don't have tons of direct data, but just thinking again about management experience, I think is important, because they're, so that example of like budget. So then my expectation would be that, if that's sort of your own skill growth area that you're hiring like people who are really strong in that. So again, just something to think about. We have indirect evidence around sort of like people's management acumen and success. And some of them speak to like their orientation to team, and we have a lot of evidence from stakeholder engagement, which I say is like a little bit different than sort of directly managing a team. So Again, just something.
Dawson Owens, because we have such a strong lead candidate and there was such great outpouring of support also from the community. And from my knowledge, we don't have any issues with our second candidate that have arisen, right? In that Dr. Sanchez was tied, and in that there is some appetite in moving forward with switching out Coons for Mitchell, correct? I'm willing to make that motion. Because I feel like we have at least two candidates that we are very confident in, and if that would be this was other conversation.
Thank you, Member Dawson Owen. So just to repeat, that would be a motion to move forward the three candidates, with those three candidates being Dr. Victor Wakefield, Dr. Heather Sanchez, and Dr. Mitchell. And second. Second. Thanks. Any additional conversation or points of discussion? Okay, with that, I'll call for a vote. All in favor for moving forward those three candidates to the governor's office for his consideration and decision, please say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. Any abstention? Seeing none, we have a unanimous vote from this board to move forward those three candidates to the governor's office for consideration for our next state superintendent of public instruction. Thank you, board members. All your work on this list.
Congratulations to three candidates selected, and also thank you to those who interviewed this panel. So we had some great people here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much to all who applied and saw interest in serving the students and families of Nevada. Greatly appreciate that. All right. Are there any additional? So what we will move forward to the governor are the three names, and then there will also be available all the materials that we've had at our disposal and that are made public on the NDE website. All of these recordings and our conversations will be available to assist in informing the governor's decision. And unless anyone has anything additional they would like to add on agenda item 5, we can move on to agenda item 6, which is our adjournment. All right, well, with that, I would like to thank all of the candidates who had interest in serving as our state superintendent. We appreciate the time and expertise that you took to share with us. And I want to greatly appreciate Deputy Superintendent Lisa Ford and Angie Castellanos for all their support during this process. And also to all the board members who spent a considerable amount of time and effort making sure that we made the best decisions for students in the education system here in Nevada. And I just have a lot of appreciation for all that it took to get to this point, and I appreciate all of us and all the candidates who made this happen. All right, well, thank you all for your time and participation today, for being in person and for listening in online. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is September 10th at 9 a.m. If there are questions, we will adjourn the meeting at 12:49. Thank you.